Now, in a moment, we're going to be discussing the newspapers with marketing expert Alison Stewart-Allen and journalist and author Bidisha Mamata. A very good morning to both of you. Lovely to see you both.
You too.
First, let's take everyone through the front pages, though, shall we? And the Eye leads with the escalation of Israel's military action, with the headline, Gaza blackout as Israel launches onslaught. The Daily Telegraph also has the war on its front page, describing last night's move by the Israeli military as the largest advance yet. Carnage looms is the ominous headline in the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mail writes, Gaza is pounded as phones and internet are cut off. The Guardian focuses on the devastation inflicted on the people of Gaza, reporting that families are struggling for food and shelter. Meanwhile, the Daily Express labels Israel's actions an unprecedented bombardment. The Times looks at the impact of the conflict in the UK, reporting that Iran is hijacking British protests. And the Financial Times has news of declining share prices for NatWest. So let's talk through some of those stories now with Alison and Bidisha. And the front page is dominated by what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Bidisha, you've picked out the Eye's front page to begin with. There it is, Gaza blackout as Israel launches onslaught. This after Israel's military last night said that it's expanding its operations on the ground, and we've also seen heavy aerial bombardment as well.
Yes, and you've been covering it overnight. I think we should really hear what we're being told by the authorities. So they're talking in the language of escalation. This is clearly deliberate, and it's very interesting to me because, of course, all the papers are leading with this story, and I think the entire world community is appalled by this because, as the UN General Assembly says, the idea of collective punishment goes against international law. If you go online, it seems as if it's a very divisive issue, but actually I think that everyone is united in the sense of the punishment of innocent civilians is a universal principle of peace, and this is what so many critics are saying. So, of course, it's absolutely devastating to look at these headlines, and the words you've used are so telling. You know, bombardment, siege, forced movement, pounding. It's the language of punishment and the language of taking away essential resources which are universal principles, you know, food, shelter, and power. This is why everyone is so alarmed by it. And I don't think there's anything very ambiguous or even very controversial about that reaction.
Although Israel would say it's not targeting civilians, they insist they're only targeting militants in this operation. Yeah. And they say they're giving civilians warning to move when they go into an area.
That is definitely true, and that is what they've said. But you've got to ask, where is there for a civilian population to move to, a large civilian population? What is surrounding it? What are the actual circumstances on the ground? I think that no civilian on any side of this situation, I have not seen one civilian from anywhere interviewed saying, oh yes, I'm completely in favor of this, this is fine, this is just absolutely reasonable and proportional. Not one person.
And the aid agencies warning of really dire problems there in Gaza. Let's move on to other stories. I think the FT is one of the few front pages actually that has a different story on its front page, doesn't it? And it does cover Gaza as well, but their main story focuses on this report into the debanking of Nigel Farage by NatWest.
Yes, and this report suggests that Mr. Farage was treated unfairly in the way that he was, his banking service was withdrawn by NatWest. It also highlights in the story that on the back of that report, the share price of NatWest dipped to 18% decline, and then finally settling at a 10% hit. I think the bigger business story, in a way, is about the then CEO Alison Rose, who has since left on the back of her sadly briefing on a BBC journalist about this, or revealing about the fact that Mr. Farage's account was being withdrawn, and giving a reason that was not apparently in line with policy, and breaking confidentiality and explaining why he was debanked. And I guess there's a lesson here really for any corporate leader, which is to be very careful and to, I mean, with Alison Rose's 30 plus years experience in this institution, a short judgment lapse at a black tie event, it really cost her job. And it's quite, indicative, if you like, of what leaders need to be doing by way of paying attention, what you say, what you shouldn't say, and frankly, you should just never, ever be talking about a client's business, regardless of whether you're at a black tie function or what.
Fairly basic data protection issue, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just this judgment lapse has cost the institution, and it's cost Alison Rose her job.
Yeah, they said that the shares have dropped. And Nigel Farage isn't happy with the report either, is he? And he wants big reform of the banking sector as a result. So whether or not there are kind of changes around that, we will wait and see. Let's move on, though, shall we, Bidisha, to a story about a 4-day working week and whether or not these councillors in particular that have been looking at introducing one.
We're looking at each other with wonder, because if you work in the media, it's not quite as overly structured as all of this. So you think, 4-day working week, isn't that our norm anyway? No, it's not the norm. So this is about a very specific work structure that's happening in local authorities and local councils. And there's a real push to get local civil servants, local authorities back into the office 5 days a week to get back to the structure of the daily grind. So that's the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And you've got local councils being sort of, what's the word that Alison might use, heavily briefed, shall we say, that the 5-day working week should be completely reinstated. And this drift that's happened during the long years of the pandemic, where people are really advocating for a greater work-life balance, no, let's not. Let's go back to 5 days. There absolutely shouldn't be 4 days, according to the diktats from on high. And of course, there's a backlash against this, because I do think a 4-day week is quite reasonable. And anyone who's done an office job knows that out of one of those 5 days, you don't get very much done.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a whole issue about productivity in this country, isn't there? But there are some suggestions that a 4-day week productivity doesn't necessarily go down. Is that
it goes up.
It goes up?
Yes. There's a huge piece of research Oxford University and others have done looking at this 4-day week. And it showed not only did employee satisfaction go way up, but productivity went up. So, you might work 10 hours, not an 8-hour day, to make up for the 5th day. But actually, it had a fantastic commercial impact as well. Companies made more money on a 4-day week.
That's so interesting.
It so is, because everyone knows that by either hump day, which is Wednesday, or the Friday, you sit there going, why have I dressed up for this? Why am I, spending 3 times longer than I ordinarily would just writing a simple email? The kind of natural working energy of human beings doesn't change according to how it's structured. So, of course, you get more done on a 4-day week.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Briefly take us to The Sun. There's a story, I haven't seen it, you'll talk me through it.
Yes.
Wilko is back.
Yes. So Wilko, as we know, has sadly met an end insofar as it's now under a new ownership. And the company that owns them now, called The Range, is oddly enough opening 5 new stores this side of Christmas because those plans were already underway before that acquisition. Now, this is perfect, fantastic timing because Wilko is renowned for its sort of everyday low prices proposition, promise to consumers, and it's a wonderful retailer that seems to be leaving the high street, but it is coming back in time for the holidays. So what's great about that is that in our current economic situation, where people are watching their pennies, how fantastic that you can still at least, have a household name like Wilko to go to get gifts and other essentials. So I think it's a good news story, actually.
Okay, and they're hard to find these days,
they
aren't
are.
they? Let's be honest. But anyway, lovely to see you both for now. You'll be back for another look through the papers in an hour's time, but for the moment, thank you.
Thank you.